Greetings, everyone. My name is Sherley Adalia, and I'm here to present our article titled How the Feminist Sweden Respond to COVID-19, Feminist Foreign Policy Analysis on Sweden's Development Aid to Uganda. Okay, so starting off with the background of the research, in 2014, Sweden adopted an initiative feminist foreign policy, or FFP, a political framework aimed to further translate feminism theory to a more tangible guidelines for states to form their foreign policy, which have five focus areas: aid, trade, defense, development, and diplomacy. Seeing their achievements in development aid, we decided to focus our research on that field. Other than achievements, they also face some challenges, but one challenge which recently emerged is COVID-19 pandemic. Reported by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated gender inequality in the world, which increased the need of developing countries for foreign aid. The Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, or SIDA, has established long-term development cooperation with countries that fit their targets. And Africa is the region that has the most countries cooperating with SIDA, and one of them is Uganda. In accordance with the UN Women Database, Uganda suffered from substantial gender issues, and data showed that there have been an increase in the number and severity of gender injustice in just 1 year because of COVID-19 pandemic in Uganda. As one of the countries SIDA is working closely with in development cooperation, a question came out that asks Sweden, as a feminist country, how they adapt their development aid program in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic through their feminist foreign policy framework. This is what the journal uncovers. Now, moving on to the literature review, there are 6 references that we use. The first one tried to theorize FFP by confronting the problem of the implementation of ethical foreign policy, international good citizenship, and good statehood that is still gender blind. Later in 2019, which is in the 4th article in the presentation, the same authors provided an assessment of the gradual development of the Swedish FFP. And similar to this research, our journal article uses the 3Rs, or oral rights, resources, and representation, which is a pillar of Swedish FFP. And it is used as one of the indicators for assessing the implementation of the Swedish FFP from theory to practice and how the process has evolved over time. This helps the authors to see the political situation in Sweden which affects their FFP. Moving on from theorization, the second article here explained the main problem focused by Sweden is the problem of a systemic gender inequality, which affects the goal of Swedish foreign policy itself. In this case, we continued the findings of the findings of this journal article, which states that the Swedish foreign policy is based on a feminist liberal sensibility that sees global society as based on an imbalance of power between men and women. And then later, focusing more on COVID-19 and FFP, the 3rd and 5th article here argues that countries need to raise the issue of growing gender inequality to ensure foreign policy priorities in addressing systemic discrimination. This journal helps a lot to validate the urgency of our research because both discuss the priorities of feminist country in forming its FFP in the COVID-19 pandemic. Apart from different countries, this journal also didn't discuss changes before and during pandemic, which is where the differences between the journal and our research lays. And the last one, the 6th one, is very useful for the author to look at the Swedish FFP aid program before COVID-19 pandemic to later be used as a reference in comparing with the Swedish FFP aid program in response to the COVID pandemic. This report provides clear arguments that we can use to examine the reality of Sweden's FFP policy making process in COVID-19 pandemic. The next one is the research method. This research used the descriptive qualitative method with a literature study as the main source to compose the analysis. The primary data was extracted from the Swedish government website called OpenAid, which is a site that provides information on Swedish development and cooperation aid. And through this site, the authors gathered foreign aid reports from Sweden to Uganda starting from 2018 to 2021. And the gathered data was formed into a table consisting of the top 5 development aid priority list granted by Sweden to Uganda, again from 2018 to 2021. Later, the data we found is analyzed using an empirical feminism theory. And moving on to the main presentation, which is the result and discussion. Here we can see on the right side that there is a table consisting of top 5 fund granted from 2011 to 2021. And we can see the changes of priority based on the different colors. Besides that, we can also see the reoccurrence of some programs in the priority list because hence of the same colors. From 2018 until 2021, there are actually 11 different programs that were put in the top 5 list, the development aid to Uganda. And from 11 programs, 3 of them came 3 times in the top 5 fund list for 4 years. And the first, which is the first one, is moving on to the next slide. The first one, we have divided it into three categories. The first one is the programs that came out 3 times, which is the most common one, or the most common one to occur. The second one is that came up out of the programs that came up 2 times of 4 times, and the last one is the programs that only came up in the list once. For the first category, the first program is UNFPA and UN Women Joint Program on GBV in Uganda 2018 and until 2023. This aid came in the list every year except in 2020 when the COVID pandemic hit. The second one is Democratic Government's facility, which came all 3 years except in 2021. And the third one is World Bank Reproductive, Maternal, and Child Health Services 2017 until 2021, which comes in all 3 years except 2018. Next category is there are also 3 programs. The first one is COVID-19 WFP UNICEF. Which came in 2020 and 2021. This makes sense since Sweden decided to reprogram the funds to address COVID-19, where they're reallocated $4.2 million as an emergency cash transfer targeted to pregnant and lactating women and children. The second one is UN Women Uganda 2022 until 2023, which came in 2022 and 2021. Also makes sense since the timeline target of the program did only start in 2020. The third one is COVID-19 UNICEF, which came in 2018 and 2020. And the original purpose of this program was to support UNICEF in reducing maternal health. But however, after implementing it for 2 years, they were challenged by COVID-19 pandemic, and therefore they decided to adapt with the pandemic. They decided to adapt it by renaming and reprogramming this program to be more relevant with some additional outputs and cost extension to respond to COVID-19 pandemic, especially in West Nile. The last category is the 5 other programs that only came up once in the list, and there are support to FAO, the OHCHR, bilateral research, umbrella fund, and IDLO. We found that these programs were included into the top of the list because of students' political and social situation or the condition of the agreement of the development program. For example, with the WEE program, it got into the top list because the agreement stated the program was to be started in 2018, which is exactly where they came up into the top list. And another example is the IDLO, or International Development Law Organization, where in 2017, we found that Sweden became a state member of IDLO, and the authors also found that on March 16th, 2022, the Ugandan government signed the host country agreement with IDLO, and this means the implementation of the program can immediately be started, which is where the year this IDLO came up. By analyzing SIDA's top 5 development aid priority funds to Uganda, we can see how the priority list from 2018 and 2019, which is before COVID-19, and also 2020 and 2021, which is after COVID-19, plays out. This comparison is used to answer the question of whether Sweden's FFP still uses gender perspective. And we found that through FFP, Sweden still manages to use gender perspective in assessing development aid to Uganda in the pandemic. And since in the pandemic, every aid is redirected to handle COVID-19, adjusting it with the original purpose, outcome, and cost. In responding to COVID-19 pandemic, every aid have either allocated and to accumulated support to mitigate COVID-19 pandemic or reprogram their fund to mitigate COVID-19 pandemic. Either way, 2020 was the year where you can see the adaptation of the objectives of the aid due to the pandemic. Um, Later, we can conclude that this paper argues the Sweden's through SIDA did still use their gender perspective and prioritize women's and girls' experience in responding to COVID-19 in Uganda. It is in every year that all programs in the top 5 list which were granted by SIDA have the objective to achieve gender equality in any relevant field. The adaptation process in responding COVID-19 did hinder many expected outcomes. However, in 2020, when the COVID pandemic hit, SIDA used two methods to keep the perspective as the foundation, either to reprogram the programs as an emergency aid, or the second method is for the programs that were not reprogrammed, they were added to some new objectives or adjustment to COVID-19. By this, we end this presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunities.